On that note, we'll go on to Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Thanks for waiting.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt. I've tried to call him several times, but I seem to miss you all the time. I need to preface this thing. Things are either true or not true, right?
Correct. And thank you for saying that things are either true or not true, rather than saying things are either true or false, because that saved us a whole conversation.
Right. Okay. So basically, we could split everything into two columns. And what is true as an absolute.
I don't understand what you mean. I'm happy to say that everything is either true or not true. I don't know why you would have to bring in an absolute.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, is what is possible, is that true or is it not true? If something is possible, you got a 3 on a dice. It's possible to roll a 3, right?
If you have a standard die that includes a 3, then we calculate the probability. Yes, it's possible to roll a 3, assuming that the die isn't configured so that it can't roll a 3. Then you would say
that it's true.
Then you could say that
you can't say that it's true that it will roll a 3.
It can't say that it's true that it will roll a 3.
Well, all right. Let me. True and not true are like two ends of a string. Would you agree with that?
No.
There's everything fits into one of the two columns.
Yes, everything is either true or not true. We established that in the very first opening sentence.
Okay. So what can we put into the true column?
That gets down to a definition of truth, and the definition of truth that I use most frequently is a thing is true if it conforms to the facts of reality.
Okay. Is truth absolute?
Yeah, you'd have to describe what you mean by absolute, but in the sense that it is true, where identity is self, it's absolute in that sense. That I hope you're not talking about confidence levels, because I don't think you can be absolutely confident about anything. But when you say, one is one, and then you say that statement is true, there's a context in which it's absolutely the case that statement is true.
Okay. Well,
I'm trying to see what we're getting to, because right off the bat we agreed everything's true or not true, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. What case are you trying to make?
Okay. Well, okay, because I believe in God because I believe in truth.
Okay.
But I believe that things that are true, and that whatever it is that is true, nothing else is true.
Okay, I'm with you. Steve, hang on. I'm with you that whatever is true. That's a tautology. You're right. Whatever's true is true. Okay? When you say you believe in God because you believe in truth, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. The question is it true that a God exists?
Okay, well,
how do you determine whether or not that? Okay, here's a statement. Some God exists. Is that statement true or not true, and how do you determine that?
Okay. Well, no. Well, okay. I see what you're saying. And
I'm saying what you were saying. I asked a question, Steve.
Okay.
Steve, everything is Steve.
Not true. I'm going to say that statement is not true.
Okay. So it's not true
because I don't know. Because I don't know if God is true.
Okay. First of all, we didn't get to whether or not you know, or degrees of certainty or confidence levels. You say everything's true or not true. I agree. Then on the statement, some God exists, you say that statement is not true. I agree. But yet you claim that you believe that a God exists, and you claim that you cared about truth. And you've just acknowledged that from your position, it is not true that some God exists. So then why would you believe in a God?
Because I believe in truth as an absolute.
Okay, you're not, Steve.
Yeah.
Everything's true or not true, right?
Yes.
Now the statement, some God exists, is not true, right?
True. But it's not because it's false.
Now, I'm not saying it's false, Steve. I'm just going with what you said.
I know.
That you said it's not true, correct?
Right.
And yet you claim that you believe in a God, and that your reason for believing in a God is because you believe in truth. And yet you are now in contradiction because you are believing something to be true while acknowledging that it's not true.
Well, I'm acknowledging the fact that I don't know as an absolute.
No, you're not, Steve, because I set aside this idea of knowledge and absolutes. I just said the statement, some God exists. Is that true or not true? And you said it's not true, and yet you still believe, and yet you also claim to care about truth. Those things are irreconcilable.
Okay.
You cannot say X is not true, but I believe X and I care about truth. One of those three things has got to go. Which one is it?
Okay. Well, then I believe that God is true.
You believe that God is true. That's a nonsensical statement.
I believe that God exists.
Okay, you believe, so the statement, some God exists, you believe is true.
Yes.
But you just a minute ago said you believe it's not true, or that you're evaluating is not true. So now you both have claimed that you believe that some God exists is true.
Okay.
And that you believe some God exists is not true.
I'm not verbalizing it right. I may have misspoken in that sense then. I believe that God exists because things are true. This is what God represents.
What does God and his existence have anything to do with truth? Because I'll tell you right now that no matter what you say, any defense you give of this is necessarily circular. Because now you're going to say there can be no truth without God, and therefore, because there's truth, there is God.
No.
Okay.
I'm not saying that.
I'll bet you $1 you're getting ready to.
Oh. Well, I may send you $1. I believe that things are true. Okay? And I think that God represents those things in the sense that truth is knowable, isn't it?
Truth is knowable. I'm not completely. Can we know in the sense of being aware that things are true? Yes, because we experience reality. We can be aware that things comport with reality. Now, it may be the case that truth itself, that the true nature of everything is beyond us. All we're really doing is creating probabilistic models of our experience. But when you say that something comports with reality, and we're going to define this as true, then yes, we know of things that fit that definition.
But there's also things in the universe, things that we haven't discovered yet that are true, but we don't have knowledge of it currently. We haven't, reached that far, or looked in that space, or whatever else. And so that didn't affect the fact that those things still are true in their own right, whatever.
Yeah, 5 miles under, 2 miles underground on Neptune at a specific coordinate is a 27,000 carat diamond. Let's just say that that's true. That doesn't mean anybody knows that it's true. It's a fact about reality that we have not yet discovered, but we could go there and discover it, and when we discovered it, then we would know the truth of this. Now, you believe that a God exists. Why?
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me go back. Okay. I think I don't know if it was you or maybe it was Phil or somebody made the statement that God was born out of our ignorance.
Oh, I've probably said that about many different ideas about God. I'm not sure that we've actually established which God you're talking about yet.
Well, I'm just approaching this from a deist type of thing, a God. I'm not arguing for any specific. I want to.
So I've said this before,
it's more along the lines of trying to define what I believe God is.
Yeah, I've said this before, and I'd make no apologies. The God concept within deism is nonsensical, useless garbage. People have identified with a concept and are desperately trying to find a way to make that concept seem real. the deistic God, even arguing for a prime mover. Ultimately, when you get to talk about deistic notions of God, they believe in something of which they can tell you no characteristics or qualities or anything else and have no way to verify any of it. So the deistic God is the single most useless God concept I think I've ever heard.
Okay.
And if it doesn't manifest in reality in some detectable way, then you have no mechanism by which to claim that it exists. This is why you're doing,
okay.
This is why, Steve, you're doing the truth dance by saying, I believe the statement is not true. Oh, wait a minute, I misspoke. I believe that there's a God, and I believe this because we have truth, and I believe some things are true, and therefore there needs to be a God for this to be true.
No. God, it's not that God.
You said a minute ago, you said just a moment ago, God is like the summation of all truth.
I don't believe I said that.
Well, I put it in different language, but you essentially said that God is all true things.
No, that's not what I meant.
Okay, what do you mean?
God, I think that God represents the things that we don't know.
I don't want to know what God represents. I want to know what God is. Because when you say God represents, now you're just using a label placeholder that is an abstraction. Okay. What is God? What God are you talking about?
Well, I don't know how to explain this then.
Do you have it? What is your definition of God? You believe there's a God? How can you believe something and not have some rudimentary definition?
Okay, my definition, here's my definition. Here's what I'm trying to get to, I guess, is I define God as the holder of truth.
Oh.
God is that truth can be known.
Okay. God is the holder of truth.
Yes.
What does that mean, holder of truth? Does that mean somebody who knows all true things?
That knows things. Yes, he knows the truth of things.
So does he know the truth of all things?
Yes.
How do you know this?
Because truth must be known. Things must be true.
I just gave you an example. I just gave you an example of something that could be true and yet unknown.
You don't know it.
If everybody in the universe dies, including God, but the planets stay here, is it still true that there's a telephone sitting right here on my desk?
Yes.
Then truth doesn't need to be known. So now go back and try and redefine God again.
Wait a minute. Hold up. You said that if everybody's gone except for God and the telephone.
No. If everybody's gone, every mind is gone, and even the God that you think exists ceases to exist, such that only physical stuff in this universe exists. There are no more minds to know anything.
Okay.
Is it still true? Is it still true that there's a telephone on my desk?
There's no way to know.
No, there is a way to know. I just defined the scenario in which everything else remains the same. This telephone is still sitting here, and every mind in the universe and outside the universe, every mind that could know anything, ceases to exist right now, yet this remains the same. Is it still true that there's a phone sitting on this desk?
Well, okay, the truth of the phone sitting on the desk would be unknowable at that point.
I'm not worried about whether or not it's unknown or unknowable. I'm asking, is it still true that there's a phone on this desk?
Okay, is something? Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is if something is unknowable, it's indifferent from what exists.
Is it still an accurate fact that there is a phone sitting on this desk?
No.
I don't know what we can continue to talk about then, because what you're describing as truth has nothing in common with what I describe as truth. Truth is that which comports with the facts of reality. And if the fact of reality is that there's a phone sitting on this desk, then it is true that there's a phone sitting on this desk, completely independent of whether anybody is aware of it or not. Your model denies all truth that isn't in the current awareness of some individual, which is why you're positing a God that knows everything when you have no reason to think a God knows anything. Your argument is There must be a God who knows anything, otherwise there can be no truth, which is what I told you were arguing 10 minutes ago. You owe me $1.
Yeah, but that I didn't understand as far as things, if there has to be an external source to hold the truth until it becomes knowable. That's kind of where it was kind of going towards. But I was thinking like of the moon Europa. We recently discovered, or relatively recently, that there was a liquid ocean underneath the crust of ice.
Yep.
That was on the outside. And before we knew that, before we actually discovered that fact, that was true. It was already there.
Yep.
We just didn't know about it. It was the ice sitting on top, the water underneath. It was sitting there, but we didn't have knowledge of it. That doesn't make it any less true that the water existed, that it was actually liquid water underneath that portion. Now that we know, it's awesome. We can put it in books and put it online or whatever else, but it's been true the entire time as far as we understand. Well, at least as far as that formation is concerned.
But he thinks the only reason it was true is because there was a God to know that it was true before us. The truth requires some actual interaction with a mind. Now, this is kind of a fungible idea of truth that separates it from the fact of the matter. And that's why I said, let's just throw out the word truth. The fact of the matter is there's a phone sitting here on this desk. And if everybody who knew about it died, there still would be a phone sitting on this desk.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be aware of it, and nobody would know it. But the fact that something isn't currently in our awareness, it's like his model makes every discovery not true
until it was discovered.
Not true until it was discovered.
Yeah.
And that is a usage of the word truth that is about not what is true, but what we can identify as true.
Yeah.
And those are two distinct things, and that's why we kept talking past each other about truth, because the fact of the matter of what something is separate from whether or not I understand what it is, or if I'm aware of what it is, or if anybody is aware of what it is. Mm-hmm. But what do I know? Because I clearly thought it was impossible for Jehovah to both be everywhere and not be in me.
You certainly inhaled them. That was the thing. That's the thing that happened.
It's Jehovah, man. All right.